So hi, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Milltrust International webinar series. I'm Hayden Craig, a venture partner within the Milltrust team. Now, along with the rest of the team, I'm excited to bring to you this webinar with presenters who will share some of their insights on our topic, genetic solutions for a more sustainable food system. This is part of Milltrust's Green Earth Ventures investment theme, which is one of three themes as part of our British Innovation Fund 2, the second iteration of our first successful fund of the same name. The other themes are future health, where we focus on life-transforming medical science and tech ventures, and smart proteins, focus on channeling climate capital towards the scaling of the alternative protein sector. Now, for those of you who don't know Milltrust, we're an award-winning specialist investment company co-located in London and Singapore. We have a range of investment solutions across public and private markets, all built under our ethos of sustainable prosperity. This underpins our thesis for all of our investment themes under the British Innovation Fund. With our focus today being on Green Earth Ventures, it's important to note that we're at a critical juncture. The climate crisis creates unparalleled challenges and volatility never seen during the course of humankind. This threatens all aspects of the world we often take for granted: food, water, energy, climate, health. However, solutions exist, and our focus must be on deploying capital towards innovations, solutions, and systems which improve our efficiency to reduce and ultimately remove our reliance on fossil fuels and high greenhouse gas emitting practices. Genetics technologies provide one such tool. As we've seen from COP27, policymakers struggle to reach agreement, and it begs the question whether their actions genuinely move the needle. Ultimately, the private sector needs to take action through R&D, innovation, and investment in these solutions. We're a specialist team with commercial experience in operations and commercialization, but underpinned by deep expertise across medicine, biology, food production, genetics, and data science. One of the keys to our British Innovation Fund thesis is our connection to global universities and research institutions, where groundbreaking solutions are being generated. We believe these institutionally created deep tech innovations, combined with highly capable commercial leadership teams, are one of the keys to solving our world's challenges. If this is something that interests you, then please reach out to one of the Milltrust team for more information. Now on to the topic of the day, genetic solutions for a more sustainable food system. So for me, genetic technology is an exciting field, but to some, it's a scary topic. Part of it is probably the unseen nature of the molecular world, but genetic selection has been occurring for millennia under natural selection. Early farmers manipulated the principles of natural selection in a very basic and rudimentary way, selecting the better looking, better performing animals and plants, which were crossed to make slightly better versions of the previous generation, something our natural world has been shaping for millions of years, harnessing population variation. Then into the modern world, where we're able to access more advanced methods using data and mathematics to increase the rate of selection, combined with an increased knowledge of how genes and inheritance works, to more current technologies where genetic markers can be used to identify the carrier of favorable traits, ultimately improving our performance and efficiency, be it growth rate, taste, or reduced methane emissions, or through to our ability to fast-track selection using tools such as gene editing, which effectively harnesses the existing genetic variation and fast-tracks multiple generations of selection. I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Timothy Byrne, Managing Director of Abacus Bio International. Abacus is a world-leading agri-science company with extensive experience in the application of genetic technology. They've been involved with a variety of genetic improvement programs globally across most farm species in both plant and animal. So over to you, Tim.
Thanks very much, Hayden, and good morning, everybody. Today I want to share with you some insights into how genetics works at a reasonably high level, and then share some examples about how we can quantify the value of genetic improvement in a couple of different species and a couple of different industries. And then finally, I will move on to the topic of gene editing as a precursor to passing over to Yannick. So first, a little bit about how genetics adds value. As Hayden said, the power of genetics lies in our ability to leverage the variation that exists in the population and apply selection to that variation. Again, as Hayden said, we can target multiple economic and environmental traits or other things of interest to the supply chain. Genomics technology, as I'm sure you've heard, has increased the speed and value of genetics to a huge extent. And there are other tools sitting on the shelf there ready to be deployed, like gene editing. And of course, this fits in a suite of tools available to help deliver some solutions to these problems we face in the world today. Just out of interest for you, if you look at those birds on the right-hand side, they're all the same age, they're all 56 days old. And through genetic improvement, the size of those birds has roughly quadrupled at the same age over a period of about 50 years. So that demonstrates the power of harnessing data and selecting superior individuals to be the parents of subsequent generations. How does it work? There'll be a couple of principles here that are very familiar to the crowd here, and that is that genetics is cumulative and permanent. So one of those little squares there represents 1 year of genetic change in whatever metric is considered valuable for genetic change. So it could be, like Hayden said, growth, reproduction, environmental impact mitigation, or eating quality. So it's permanent. So 1 year of change stays around and it accumulates up, which means that efforts in genetic improvement have long-term sustained impact. If you compare that to something like fertilizer, where you apply the product and it's basically harvested out as the product you produce leaves the farm, so to speak. And so it's really this cumulative and permanent nature of genetic improvement that drives its value. I've now got a couple of examples of how we use this cumulative and permanent characteristic of genetic improvement to add value from both a profit perspective and from an emissions reduction perspective. So I won't go into the weeds here too much, but basically the idea is that we can track the progress of a population of animals because we have data to understand how it's changing over time. On the right-hand side, there is a graph of a whole lot of sheep breeds, and that's their performance for scan weight, which is a growth trait, over time. And that's just one example. We can accumulate all the kind of genetic traits that might add value. So things that relate to the size of the animal, their reproductive efficiency, how good of mothers they are, and the quality of the product they produce. So we gather together the data that describes how the population is changing over time from the selection decisions that have been made, and we put a value on that. So we know from an analysis of a farm system that if you change the growth of an animal, you either receive more revenue because it's bigger when you sell it, or you can sell it earlier, and that saves feed costs. So we apply to all of those genetic changes that are happening some sort of measure of the economic impact that those changes have. And we can come up with a number, for example, of 2.1 million pounds per year across the sheep industry for the selection decisions that have been made from genetics. If you then take that 2.1 million and account for the cumulative and permanent nature of genetic improvement, you can actually calculate a net present value of the genetic improvement decisions that have been made by breeders in the industry. And for sheep, which is not a headline species by any means, we're talking, a net present value over 20 years of 183 million pounds. If you annualize that number, then we're in the order of about 15 million pounds a year. So just to put that in context, there's about 15 million female breeding sheep in the UK. So genetics is adding about a pound per breeding female in profit every year to the farm production system. And so that adds up. That is real money in the pocket of growers, and that's real money for the supply chain. Importantly, you can't always think about just profit these days. We really need the sustainability of the production system to be at the forefront. And so we can also quantify how genetic improvement reduces the environmental footprint of food production. So those selection decisions that have been made by the industry to select the better animals, as Hayden mentioned, that's actually driving improvements in environmental efficiency. So there's a few numbers on this page, but if I just draw your attention to the kind of contribution that genetic improvement is making to emissions reductions in gross terms, so just total output of methane emissions from sheep, genetics in 10 years' time can be expected to have reduced emissions by 1% per year. So those numbers, they feel small, but it all counts. And this is sheep, which, as I said before, is not really a headline species. I've got another example after this of something that's a bit more impactful. And if we think about the balancing of emissions reductions with food production, obviously we still need to produce meat. And so if we convert those emissions per kilogram of carcass weight, then the reductions are 200% higher than on gross terms, roughly. So really good gains to be made from genetic improvement driving emissions reductions. Over the Irish Sea now to something with a little bit more scale and a little bit more potential value from genetic improvement. So this is the Irish dairy industry. Hayden mentioned at the start about the kind of technologies available to us to increase the rate of genetic gain. So what I just showed you is the genetic progress that can be made from what's called conventional genetic improvement. So it's selection based on data built on the performance of animals. If we bring DNA information into that, we can get significant gains in the value of genetic improvement. So in Ireland, the rate of genetic gain before genomics came about was delivering about €8 per cow per year of increased profit to the farmer. Post-genomic era, it's up to 12. So we're talking about a 50% increase in the accumulation of profit as a result of deploying genomic technology. And the numbers get pretty big. So this is exactly the same method that I showed you in sheep, where we accumulate those benefits over time and look at the scale of value being added. So through a combination of selection for production, improved fertility of the cows, and some other traits related to calving and health. In the Irish dairy industry, genetics has added about 1.5 billion euros to the pockets of farmers over the space of about 15 years. And that's like adding 83 euros of profit per cow per year to the dairy farmers pocket. So significant value to the industry as a result of accumulating those benefits of genetic improvement. What we can also do is predict how genetics is going to contribute value in the future. So that historic accumulation of value of genetics of 1.5 billion euros there over about 15 years, because of the permanent nature of genetics, that stays around. So you've made those changes, they're permanent, and the industry keeps capturing those benefits into the future. So if we look 20 years into the future, that the gain that's been made over the past 15 years, which was worth 1.5 billion euros, actually contributes another 4 billion euros to the pockets of Irish dairy farmers. But we've got increased rates of genetic gain. So if we then say, right, if you carry on this path of selection for another 10 years, and we also have that permanent element of genetic improvement, so we can say, let's look out 20 years into the future and capture the full value, we're talking about 2.85 billion euros in the next 20 years as a result of genetic improvement to the Irish dairy industry. just to put it in context again, so I'd mentioned that there are about 15 million sheep in breeding ewes in the UK, and they're getting about an extra pound of profit per year. There are about 1.5 million dairy cows in Ireland. So you can quite quickly see that 2.85 billion divided by 1.5 million is a huge number in terms of the value add per dairy cow per year. So there's a couple of examples of the scale of value of genetics. There's a lot of complication under the hood, but it's not scary, and it's tried and tested technology that can really deliver value. Another technology which is certainly on its way to being available for commercial delivery is gene editing. And so what gene editing does is it targets specific changes within a species at particular genetic sites to control the outcomes, basically. And as Hayden said, it can really fast track the genetic progress that I've just been showing you. Importantly, it's not cross-species genetic introduction or engineering. So it's not about what is traditionally called genetic modification. It's just a fast tracking of the genes that are in animals to bring them to the fore and increase that rate of genetic gain. It has the ability to have a number of influences. The first is that it can really drive the impact of major genes on populations. Lowest hanging fruit, I would say, is really improved animal welfare and health and all the benefits that that brings. Reduced environmental impact is also on the table for these major gene effects. And of course, we need to be aware of improved efficiency of resource use. And so targeting that with gene editing is also a really nice thing to think about. And one thing which leads nicely into Janev's talk is that this technology also offers the ability to influence the way genetic merit is transmitted out to the population. And for example, controlling things like sex determination. So with that, I will pass back to Hayden, and I look forward to questions a little later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Really insightful presentation. In the interest of time, we'll keep moving on, but I'm sure we'll have some time for questions later on. And so please, everyone, post your questions on the Q&A tab, and when we get to the after Janev is finished speaking, we'll direct some questions to the presenters. So now moving on to Janev, the CEO of a company called Cody Genetics, who have developed a technology to generate animals which provide 100% accurate sex-biased progeny. So, for example, a bull that only generates female calves. Currently, this is done with an inaccurate technology called flow cytometry, where semen is sorted into male or female sperm. Now, Tim's provided some examples of why gene editing is an important technology, but the technology that Cody offers a solution to some of the more inhumane elements of our food system, such as the billions of day-old chicks slaughtered based on their sex. So now, please, I'd like to welcome Janev.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Hayden, and thank you, Tim, for this very interesting lecture. The two revolutions, the genomic revolution and the gene editing revolution, started as two different revolutions, but there is no question that they are synergetic and will go hand by hand into a world where we can produce more food in a less contaminant way and in a more human way. So gene editing is not a dream. Gene editing is a reality. I'm a veterinarian, master in agribusiness, and the founder of Cody Genetics, the company that is aiming to bring this reality into the livestock daily breeding. I will try to show you how. Wait a second. I will try to show you how gene editing will increase the efficacy of the breeding and will make it much more human and more sustainable. So no matter if one breeds cattle, swine, or poultry, he would like to influence on the sex of the offspring. No matter, the reasons are different, but in the end of the day, the farmer needs certain sex over the other sex. So being able to bias the sex of the offspring has a dramatic impact on the breeding. Let's speak first about the bovine sector. In the bovine sector, we would like to serve the elite cows with the best semen, with the semen of a bull that is coming from a dairy line. We would like to serve the rest of the cows with a semen of a bull that is coming from the beef line. Therefore, we need to influence on the sex of the offspring. The current way that it's being done is by this machine, which is the flow cytometer. This machine is destroying most of the sperm, and we can obtain some sperm that will be probably most of it a female sperm. What we are doing is totally different. Just a few words about this machine. This machine is relatively expensive. The breeding company has a direct cost of between $5 to $10 per straw. Straw is the thin syringe that is being used for the fertility IVF. And basically, this machine is reducing the quantity of sperms obtained, straws obtained from the bull from 300 straws to 30 to 50 straws the most. What we are offering is to edit the embryo. In the way that we edit the embryo, the bull will ejaculate just sexed semen, female semen or male semen, according to the way that we edit the embryo. We are using the CRISPR technology, a technology that earned the Nobel Prize in 2020, a technology that influenced on our life in many aspects. And we are receiving much more sperm in a much higher quality from this bull due to the way that we work. Therefore, we increase dramatically the earning of the breeding company from $200,000 to $300,000 at the lifetime of a bull to $2.5 million. You can obtain 10 times more sperm, sex sperm from this bull compared to the current technology. In addition, Cody can earn between $800,000 and $900,000 from these bulls as royalties. The total addressable market of the bovine sperm market is about $1.2 billion a year. Our solution is validated by the participation of two leading breeding companies. Sion is the leading Israeli dairy genetic company, and Viking Genetics is one of the largest cattle breeding companies worldwide. Both of them will participate in the round, and they validate both the unmet need and the business model. In the swine market, there is a huge unmet need for sexing. Having said that, the machine that we've shown you cannot sort the boar semen, and our solution is working in the same fashion. We edit the embryo and receiving later on a boar that ejaculates the sex semen, and we can receive 100% of the progeny as female or a male. Right now, the breeding companies has a special lines for male and female, for dams and gilts. Therefore, the other sex is an off product. They have nothing to do with this product, and therefore they need to influence on the sex of the offspring in order to increase the efficacy of their breeding. The meat and the carcass trait are focused on sire lines. Meanwhile, the reproductive lines are more dedicated, obviously, to female. In the finishers farms, the impact is even bigger. Right now in Europe, the inhuman castration is becoming illegal. We should stop this activity that is going for centuries, and therefore the solution is to create females. We can avoid cost, we are avoiding legal challenges, we are increasing the efficacy of the breeding by that, and we are doing it in a much more human way with less waste. Let's speak about poultry. Right now, 7.5 billion day-old chicks are being culled. And why not to design a hen? This is the only industry that I know that is destroying 50% of its product at day one in a very unhuman way, culling the chicks. Why not to design a hen that will lay just a female eggs and receive, and by that we can reduce the number of hens by 50%, and receive the same quantity of eggs, or vice versa, to double the production of hens, the eggs by maintaining the same number of hens. To summarize, Cody is a Scottish company. The first trait that we aim to edit is the sex biasing. Having said that, additional traits will be followed, like disease-resistant and performance enhancement animals. We can earn royalties by participating in the creation of many thousands of breeders, and we respect sustainability. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Yaniv. Excellent, informative presentation, and exciting company applying genetic technology. So, look, let's move on to some questions. Look, the first one is for you, Tim, just on, or both of you, on the difference between genomics, so genomic selection, and gene editing. What's the difference?
Yeah, excellent question. So genomic technology actually relies on a more accurate understanding of the relationship between individuals. So the assumption is that, based on pedigree, that a father and a daughter have a relationship of 0.5, right? That's how it works. Whereas what genomics does is looks at the DNA at specific sites all the way along the DNA and says, which parent did the individual inherit most of its DNA from, or more or less than 50%. So rather than it be 0.5, it could be 0.47 or 0.53. And so it just tracks the relationships between individuals more accurately. And that means that you can create a better estimate of which animals are good and bad, because you know how accurately, you know which animals are more closely related to the good ones. Gene editing, on the other hand, it targets specific sites on the DNA to change the gene at that site with a gene from within the same species to get a desired outcome, just as Yaniv pointed to. That's the difference.
Excellent, thanks, Tim. One here for you, Yaniv, is on the regulations. What's the regulatory environment look like for gene editing? Obviously, you know, there's a lot of general concern about gene editing, and you know, and despite science trying to allay those fears, you know, what's actually happening in the regulatory environment, and how's it affecting your business?
Okay, I will start with saying something that is one of the beauties of our technology is that the offspring do not carry any gene edits or foreign DNA. The only ones that carry the gene edits and the foreign DNA are the breeders, the bulls and the boars. Therefore, the consumer shouldn't have any concern what is arriving to the table in the form of a meat or a milk do not carry the gene edits. But this is speaking about our specific technology. If we widen the angle of what is happening in the regulatory world, so the FDA already have approved gene-edited swine meat and gene-edited bovine meat for human consumption. So in Brazil and Argentina right now, we could work under the current regulation even, and in Australia and Canada, we should speak with the regulators. Having said that, the barrier in Australia and Canada are not very high. They understand that gene editing is working in a very precise way where we are not really impacting the animal, the DNA of the animal, etc. In Europe, the climate is changing slower than in the New World. Just a few days ago, the Scottish National Party declared that it will support the gene editing in Scotland. In United Kingdom, the legislation is trying to take some advantage of the Brexit and to speed up the approval of the gene editing. Europe, like always, is going behind. Having said that, post-COVID vaccination that was in somehow a gene editing manipulation vaccine, we are seeing that the atmosphere is coming much more favor understanding that we save castration, we save the cooling of day-old chicks, we are saving the elimination of the booby calves, etc. So we are bringing value to the society that in other way they cannot be obtained.
Excellent. Thanks, Yaniv. I wonder also, just, Tim, what sort of traits, when we look at gene editing as well, sort of broader than just this sex semen, what other opportunities exist, especially if we're thinking about environmental traits? Ruminant animals get a bit of a bad publicity in the media. What traits and what could genetic editing do to be able to increase environmental efficiency of ruminants?
Okay, so the good example is the trait that is already approved in the United States. The FDA approved a hornless cow. A hornless cow. Therefore, we eliminate the very ancient activity of cutting the horn of the cows and the bulls. In the swine sector, the trait that was approved by the FDA is a pig that do not carry certain allergens. It is very important, moreover, in the biomedical industries and in the food industry. Having said that, there are some people that are allergic to pig meat. We know about projects that are PRRS resistant, about like PRRS resistant pigs, etc. It might be that we will be able in the future to eliminate tuberculosis. We might be able to eliminate foot and mouth disease, therefore increase dramatically the production of animals in the third world countries.
Thanks, Yaniv. And Tim, do you have a view on that question as well?
Yeah, I do, Hayden. So I think Yaniv's given a really good example. The opportunity for gene editing is very strong for disease traits. It's because often disease traits are controlled by single genes or a fewer number of genes. So that targeted editing can actually have a big impact. Really good example of that is editing for porcine respiratory and reproductive syndrome in pigs. So that's a really nice example. Specific to the question about environmental impact mitigation, the key is to be able to find genes that influence the animal's ability to emit less methane. That would be a key thing to enable that. The other thing to note is that gene editing offers the opportunity to increase production performance, so growth rate, reproductive performance, and things like that. And those normal production performance traits, they also contribute to improved environmental outcomes because they can increase output or reduce time to slaughter and so on. And so that also contributes positively to environmental impact mitigation.
Excellent. Thanks.
I can add, for example, just the cooling of 7.5 million day-old chicks. How much energy, how much feed is being invested right now in creating those chicks that later on are being destroyed in an inhuman way? So the value that we are bringing is all over: financial, legal, and sustainable.
There's a few other questions that are around, but we've reached the end of our webinar. So if anyone has any additional questions, then please reach out. And additionally, if you're interested in discussing with Yaniv more about Cody Genetics, then please reach out to one of the Milltrust team. It's been a pleasure to host you all today, and I hope to see you again at our next webinar. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.